story first? Yeah. Okay. Ryan would like to tell a story. Maybe we sit over there. Just kind of turn over there. We can all see you.
Faster than instant karma, more powerful than desire, able to transcend suffering in a single bound. Look, in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane, it's Captain Enlightenment. When we last saw our hero, he was sitting placidly on a purple meditation cushion, counting his breaths, watching the movement of his thoughts while the hands of his Zen alarm clock pointed to the present. Meanwhile, in the thriving metropolis of Samsara, there lived one Harold Delusian. It was a typical Monday morning for Harold. He had just merged onto Freeway 85 on his way to work. But little did Harold know that within a matter of minutes, he would find himself hurtling toward a head-on collision with his mind. Come with me now for another episode in the adventures of Captain Enlightenment, brought to you by Redwood Vihara Monastery. Harold was making excellent time on his way to work at Microsoft when suddenly his worst fears were realized. For just at that moment, Harold slammed on the brakes, screeched to a halt, and found himself ensnarled in Silicon Valley, gridlocked. A surge of anger seized Harold's scattered mind. He pounded on the steering wheel. He laid on the horn. He cursed the idiots who had the nerve to get in his way. Couldn't they see he had somewhere important to go? And so he did the only logical thing he could do in circumstances like this. He rolled down the window, screamed at those idiots, and gave them a one-finger wave. But that did no good. Harold found himself stuck with nowhere to go and nothing to do but seethe with road rage. Miles away, on the outskirts of the fabled city of Nirvana, mild-mannered Beauregard D. Sattva heard a cry for help. Uncurling himself from his purple meditation cushion, he sprinted down the street to the world's last phone booth. And there he chanted a secret mantra and emerged from the phone booth wearing purple spandex leotards and tights and a matching cape and proclaimed, "Have no fear, Captain Enlightenment is here." In less time than it takes for a false thought to manifest, Captain Enlightenment rose up and flew through the air in a self-driving Tesla and landed on Highway 85 directly next to Harold Delusian, who at that time was cursing a string of 4-letter words at the top of his lungs. In the midst of his rage, Harold noticed something out of the corner of his eye. Turning to his right, he saw someone wearing spandex and a cape, and what's more, his eyes were closed and he appeared to be meditating. Harold sat there and thought, I'll do the same thing. And so he closed his eyes. But first he said, look at this joker over here, thinking he's all calm by meditating. He looks calm and stress-free. And so Harold closed his eyes, and then he did something that only a superhuman can accomplish. He breathed in and he breathed out. And when he breathed out, he let all of his stress go. And then he did it again and again, and before long, a sense of calm washed over him. 20 minutes later, Harold opened his eyes, and something incredible happened. By that time, all of the traffic was moving again. Harold found himself in the middle lane with no obstacles in front of him. The mysterious Tesla driver was nowhere to be seen. But Harold made a mental note to begin a regular practice of meditation thereafter and to consider buying spandex tights and a cape or not. The last anyone saw of our hero was in the modest suburban neighborhood of mild-mannered Beau D. Sattva. As for Harold, he spends his days sitting in front of a Zoom screen in full lotus position. His mind still takes a spin on gridlocked freeways from time to time, but thanks to Captain Enlightenment's example, he has a means by which he can apply the brakes to his anger, downshift his ego, and pull his mind over into the middle path where he can drive well below the speed limit. Somewhere in the vast Dharma realm, people are suffering. But somewhere out there is one who hears their cries. Wherever restless minds are wandering, Captain Enlightenment is there, doing his best to make the world safe for meditation.
What's next?
Yeah, I request you to share a few words with the community.
So I often make a point that the religions of the world can be divided into families or species, and the common perception that there is this thing called religion, and you can make general statements about this thing called religion that apply to all religions equally, causes much misunderstanding. And I would suggest that the religions that grew up in the Middle East, what we call the monotheistic traditions, particularly Judaism, Christianity, Islam, are essentially belief systems. And so the idea of religion that we are most familiar with in the West is of religion as belief system. And this can be seen very, very easily from the fact that the word religion and the word faith are used more or less interchangeably. So we can talk about the Christian faith or the Christian religion, Islamic faith. This in itself points to the centrality of faith and belief in dogmas in these traditions. Now the religions that grew up in India, and particularly Buddhism, are of a different species, and I would characterize this as an education system. So it's a very different concept of a religion. Not a belief system religion, but an education system religion. And a lot of the confusion that arises when people in the West particularly look at Buddhism is because they're looking at it through the lens of a belief system. Oh, you're a Buddhist, what do you believe in? Or maybe they look for some kind of key teaching and say, oh, you're a Buddhist, you believe in reincarnation. Now, these are examples of ways in which people, assuming that the belief system religion is the kind of template for all religions. So Buddhism, in my view, it's a education system kind of religion, and the Eightfold Path is the most comprehensive and profound and effective education system the world has ever seen. And to use a modern phrase, it's a holistic system. So that means you can't just take out one particular practice and develop it in isolation. You can't just take out mindfulness and just practice mindfulness, for example. And the teaching is one of an education and a training of, firstly, of conduct, secondly, of emotion and the heart, and thirdly, of wisdom, thinking. So let's go back to the gentleman in the gridlock in Silicon Valley or Bangkok or wherever it might be. So, yes, how do we deal with anger? And the Theravada Buddhist answer is we have to apply this education system in its entirety. And that means we have practices which are aimed at conduct, practices aimed at the heart, and practices aimed at wisdom. And we have to deal with all three areas simultaneously in order to be able to free ourselves from anger. So with regard to conduct, then the tool that we use in the realm of conduct is one of our superpowers. So we can use this kind of, and our superpower that we have is that we are not compelled to always follow our instincts. So we're animals and we have animal instincts, very pretty much the same as all animals, to live, to procreate, to whatever. These are basic human instincts. And in the case of animals, as far as we know, they are pretty much the prisoner of their instincts. They don't have any ability to reflect upon their instincts. So if a cat sees a mouse, it chases after the mouse instinctively, immediately. And I don't think a cat has any kind of moral dilemma about that. And I don't think it's possible to teach a cat, that you shouldn't do that. It's not a good thing to do. Put yourself in that mouse's shoes. So, as far, we don't know, but we're assuming that cats can't do that, but human beings can. So we have these strong instincts, but it's normal that we all experience times where we have not followed those instincts. Let's say we walk into an empty room and we see something valuable and something that we really want, and there's that instinct, we really want that thing. But in most cases, we don't take it. It's not immediate. I want that, I like that, I take it, and that's the end of the matter. In most cases, we don't, because we think, well, it's not mine. It wouldn't be right. Or the owner of that person would be very upset if their treasured possession was to disappear. And so we have certain ideas, ideals, principles which can exert more influence on our action than our instincts. And those overriding instincts and ideals are not fixed things. they can be strengthened and they can be trained and developed. And this is the area of education in the Eightfold Path, which we call Sila. So we're developing this mindfulness and awareness and recollection of agreements and commitments that we've made. So we make a commitment, for instance, no matter how angry I may feel, no matter how full of rage, I will not express that rage physically. I will not physically or verbally abuse anyone else, anybody at all, under any circumstances. So we're not talking about repressing rage or pretending it's not there, but we're saying we're not going to express it, because once it's out there in the world, then you've created karma which has consequences. Consequences for yourself, for your relationships with other people, for the world at large. So this is the first most important level. We're not allowing our defilements to lead us to create bad karma through action or speech. So we commit ourselves to trainings, like the precept that we take in the Pali language, I undertake the precept to refrain from hurting or harming or stealing, for instance. And so you have to really be maintaining that in your, like in the front drawer of your mind, as it were. So it's right there. So it's there immediately. So when the temptation or the pressure to express your anger arises or to steal something, it's right there. And you remember it. And that's what mindfulness in daily life means. Mindfulness means you're not just being in the present moment, but it's recollecting what you need to recollect to keep on the path of Dhamma. In this case, the precept which you have undertaken voluntarily. And in ethics, training of conduct in Buddha Dhamma, this is a key point. It has to be voluntary. If you refrain from certain actions simply because you're afraid of criticism or you're afraid of going to prison, then that's better than acting on that impulse for sure. But it's not sila, because it's not contributing to this overall education. The voluntary, volitional element is crucial to the practice of sila. So now using recollection, mindfulness of the first precept, then you're not hammering on the steering wheel, you're not opening your window and giving people one-fingered salutes, and you're not spraying four-letter words around the car. So but you've still got all this anger in your heart. So what do you do about that? Well, the training of the heart is based to a large degree on a very simple, basic psychological truth. And that is, if you divide mental states into wholesome and unwholesome states, you will observe that it's not possible for a wholesome and an unwholesome state to coexist. So what do we mean by wholesome and unwholesome, skillful or unskillful? So any thought which is rooted in greed, hatred and delusion is called an unwholesome mental state. Any mental state rooted in the absence of greed, hatred and delusion would be a wholesome mental state. So given that the wholesome and the unwholesome cannot coexist, if the unwholesome mental state is manifesting, we can perform a simple act of replacement. If you can create and cultivate a positive mental state which directly opposes the negative mental state, if it reaches a certain level of intensity and power, it will simply replace that unwholesome mental state. Here there are three, kind of, to simplify things, there are three that we can put a lot of effort into to great effect. Firstly is mindfulness. Secondly is patience. Thirdly is metta, or loving kindness. Of these three, mindfulness is most powerful, because if we're being mindful here means being sensitive to what's happening in the body and mind, being sensitive to the arising, passing away of wholesome and unwholesome dhammas. Now, if we have like a coarse, unwholesome mental state like anger, it doesn't arise out of nothing. It might feel that way, but if you look more closely, there are various indications, and they begin with the physical indications. And you should try to really observe the pattern of arousal in the body that is identified, correlated with anger. Everyone's a little bit different. So it might be some tension in the shoulders, or in the jaw, or in the chest, or in the arms. And because physical phenomena are much easier to observe than mental phenomena, you can catch this quite soon. And you say, oh, I've got that sensation in I'm starting to get a little bit irritated. So you're on the path towards this full-blown anger, but you're a long way from it yet. And so if you establish mindfulness at that point and just breathe in and breathe out and just allow that to pass away, it never progresses to that level of full-blown, four-letter word spewing anger. The development of the Brahmaviharas and of metta and compassion, and developing a facility with this, and so it becomes second nature, again means that the likelihood that anger and aggression will take over the mind is much reduced, because if you're developing a habit of kindness and forgiveness and being able to wish others well, then the likelihood that the anger and the thoughts that sustain it will arise is much less. Or if you have lost mindfulness and the anger has already arisen, then bringing the mind back to thoughts of loving kindness can reach a stage where they simply replace the anger, and the anger falls away. In the forest tradition, which I'm part, then the virtue that we hear, I know when I remember when I was first a monk, it just seemed like hearing this word more than any other word is patience and patient endurance. And Lumpur Sumedho has a wonderful definition of this as peaceful coexistence with the unpleasant. So just being able to hold things that you don't like, it's like an unpleasant impingement, and just being able to hold it there in your mind without pushing it away, and maintaining that sense of balance even in the presence of something unpleasant. And that's a real life skill to develop, and that again will inhibit the arising of anger. So we're working with the emotion of anger by cultivating wholesome mental states which directly oppose it and which can prevent its arising in the first place, or else replace it once it's arisen. This is the cultivation of the heart. But ultimately we have to move on to the cultivation of wisdom, because anger is always based upon a certain way of thinking, a certain way of framing experiences. And unless we change that basic habit of thinking, that the kinds of frames in which we're looking at our experience will never be totally free of anger. And so we're developing various reflections, and there are two kinds of wise reflections. One are based more on dealing with the thoughts and the negative thoughts which sustain anger, by sort of outflanking them and looking at them in different ways. For example, let's examine anger, and we can look at some of the classic analogies. We'll say, like, if you have a huge forest like this redwood vihara, it's like hundreds of acres, those amazing redwood trees, and extending beyond that to all of the forest cover of Northern California, and you could destroy all of that with a single match, a single flame. And similarly, all of the good karma that you've created over many lifetimes, you can destroy with just 1 second of anger. That's how potent and how dangerous and how frightening anger can be. And when we're angry, we can do anything. People who are angry can act in ways that normally they would never act, even to the extent of hitting, harming, or even killing people they love. It's that awful, that terrible. So we're trying to create a new kind of emotion in which we see anger as dangerous and frightening and shameful. This is a very skillful way of using the thinking mind. But now we're also looking in a more analytical way. And there's a story you may have heard, and I think I really like this story. It's about a man who has a brand new boat. He has a little house by the lake, and he likes to go out on the lake, and he's bought himself a new boat, and he's rowing out into the middle of the lake, and he's just feeling so good. And then what's happened? Some careless person has rowed their boat into the back of his boat, scratched all the paintwork, and of course he's angry. How could you do? This big lake, and all the places you could row your boat. Why did you row into the back of my boat? So he's very self-righteous and angry. And eventually he goes home, and the boat is repaired, and he sets out again. And would you believe it? The same thing happens for a second time. But when he turns round to give the rower a piece of his mind, he discovers that in the second occasion, this boat has no rower. It's just drifted out. It's become loose of its moorings. The damage to his boat, however, is exactly the same as on the first occasion. But now the question is, do you think, if it was you, or do you think this person would be as angry the second time as the first time? Given that the damage to the boat is the same on both occasions, I think most people would say they'd be more angry the first time. But why is it that the second time you don't feel so angry? Well, because there's nobody rowing the boat. So your perception of a being who is responsible for your pain is a factor in the arising of anger. So it's not the thing that happens itself, but it's caught up with your ideas about who's responsible, you see. So this is like a new perspective on anger. And he said, why is it if it just happens without somebody that you can blame, that somehow you feel less angry? And then if you say, oh, so-and-so made me angry, okay, well, you say, what exactly did he do? Okay, he did this, or he said this. So let's say somebody else did the same thing. Say it's your child, your daughter or your son, or your husband or your wife. Would the anger be of the same intensity? And if you think, well, if it was my daughter did it or my son did, probably wouldn't be so angry. But if the cause of the anger was the action or the speech, it would be independent of who performed that action, you see. Or you yourself, say somebody did something you say made you angry, but is there a difference if as one day you're really stressed out and tired and unhappy and somebody says that, and on another occasion you're just feeling really happy and the anger is probably different. So again, if the anger is the result of what that person did or said, there shouldn't be that variation. It shouldn't be affected by your mental state. So these kinds of consideration lead us to see that there is a difference between physical and mental suffering. So if you were to put your hand in a flame, it would burn because of the nature of skin, human skin. And a murderer put his hand in the flame, his hand would burn. A bodhisattva or an arahant put his hand in the flame, it would burn because this is the nature of skin. So this is the physical realm where it's a cause and effect relationship very clearly. But somebody says something or does something really nasty, and one person might be really angry, another person might start crying and be completely destroyed. But an arahant or a bodhisattva would not experience any of those kinds of reaction. So whereas a physical impulse, let's say the contact with flame, is irrespective of the mind of the person, some action or speech of another person will create suffering in the mind only when you lack mindfulness and wisdom. So mental suffering is a co-production. There's two things involved. There's the trigger from outside, and there's the unenlightened, ignorant reaction. And so if we are able to train our mind and we have the mindfulness and wisdom, then we can't ever live in a world where we're going to be free of triggers and things that encourage us or try to incline us or tempt us or pressure us into suffer. But we can live in a world without suffering if we know how to look after our mind. And so looking more and more clearly at the way the mind works and to see the kinds of thinking which which react to triggers from outside and result in suffering, and the ways of thinking and the ways of looking and framing experience which prevent that anger from occurring. This is the path of Buddhist practice. But we have to be doing these things together, like short term, like first aid kind of level is don't express this verbally or physically, because then it's spread and it's hard to put a halt to it. You're taking care of your heart, so you're minimizing the likelihood of anger arising, and you have means to overcome it and to let go of it when it occurs. But to deal with it at its root, you need this wise reflection, and ultimately what we call vipassana, where you see mental states arising and passing away without an owner, according simply as a flow, as a stream of phenomena. So this is the education system of the Buddha. We call sila and samadhi and panya, the training of conduct, training of emotions and the heart, and the training of wisdom.
Can I ask the question according to that? So it means that as a human, we are different than animal. Because animal has an instinct, they reflect, they react right directly to the instinct. But we have brain and mind. As a human, that we're different. So that's why when like anger will be an instinct. But anger, that means reaction to anger, like.
Well, no, anger is not an instinct in the same way, like the instinct to keep alive, the instinct to procreate. These are basic animal instincts. But anger is always based upon wrong thinking. It's always based upon ignorance.
Okay.
So like in some other religious traditions, you have idea of like righteous indignation, or often people these days will say that there's like good anger. Mm-hmm. It means like if you're being oppressed by somebody who has so much more power than you do, and you're fighting like a losing battle, it's like just really hard to keep going because there's so little hope that you'll ever be successful. So people will say the only way that you can keep fighting and keep going is to make yourself angry. That's your fuel to keep going when there's little hope of success. But in Buddhism we say no, that's foolish. That doesn't work. And because anger is always coming from ignorance and distorted view of reality, and as long as you have that anger, you're never going to act wisely. So letting go of anger, where does that take you? It takes you to equanimity, balance. But that's not the end of the story. It doesn't mean, okay, now you're okay, you're balanced. But balance is the ground in which wisdom can arise. What to do next, what to do first, what to do after. Short-term plan, long-term plan, whatever it is. What Buddhism is saying is that when you have that equanimity of mind, that balance of mind, you make wiser decisions. And that if you're motivated by anger, even if it's anger in a good cause, you're always like sabotaging yourself and you never get good results.
So it's different, so it's more like anger is come from
Ignorance.
These can be like collected in the wrong views and all kind of things, right? Yeah. Okay. And over time it could be an experience in the past and all kind of things too, right? At the point of each person maybe have, anger more than others.
Yeah. Well, you have to look at the thinking that lies behind the anger, the assumption that lies behind the anger. Like, he shouldn't do that. She shouldn't be that way. You know, why not? Why shouldn't she? You know, somebody has that level of intelligence, that level of kindness, that level of patience, got that much greed, then it's quite natural that they would act in that way. It's the result of all of the karma that they've created in the past.
And then when we do that, then the way to handle it is first being mindful, and have patience after, and then.
Well, first of all, don't act and don't speak, you know, motivated by that anger. Because every time you do, it makes it stronger. So every time you act upon anger, you increase the likelihood that you will act upon anger in the future. That's the karma. That's the karma you make. It's like you dig the hole a little bit deeper every time.
It's all about practicing too, right? Practicing yourself. Not just mindful and know that, but practicing after to contain yourself. Kind of like
อะไรนะไม่เข้าใจ
คือเหมือนกับ not just only, I mean, like the question I asked you before at Bhutan Song, so it's more like some people when they're talking about it, I listen to so different Dhamma and kind of talking about vipassana or being mindful andมีสติอยู่ตลอด
What does that mean? Being mindful, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What does it mean?
So it's more like you know the moment at the moment what you're doing. So, but then they say it's like.
But so if someone is like robbing a bank, and they know what they're doing, and are they mindful?
The mindful can be all kind, right?
Well, I wouldn't call that mindfulness. No, not in the Buddhist sense. Because in Buddhist sense, you don't take mindfulness away from all the other qualities. So mindfulness is also associated with like hiri ottappa, you know, and a sense of what's right and what's wrong and what's kind and what's not kind and what would be hurtful to other people. It's not just I know what my left hand's doing and my right hand's doing, and you know, that's not really Buddhist mindfulness. You have to have the context, the whole, the Buddhist right view as the context in which you practice mindfulness.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Maybe there's any other questions? I know some of the men have talked with me before.
John, I wonder if you have any perhaps general advice for men who are inspired by the monastic form of practice and have perhaps explored it a bit and are considering taking further steps.
I'm not sure, do you have temporary ordination in your tradition?
We don't quite have temporary ordination, but people can come and kind of spend time in the monastery, take the 8 precepts, and train, and perhaps take the novice precepts for a period of time, but not become a bhikkhu for a short time.
Did you take novice precept? Yeah, so we all have ideas, and you know, when come and live in the monastery itself, and you know, if you're just coming for shorter periods, it's like kind of like honeymoon period, you know, you just sort of see all the good things. So if you feel that you have that kind of vocation, or it's important to come and spend a longer period of time, a few months, in which you will go through the ups and downs, and you will have doubts, and you will have some things you like and some things you don't like, and you have to go through all of that as well, and get a better idea of whether you're really suited for this kind of life. and in the tradition to take maybe the samanera, the novice precepts, and that's a good time to check and really see, well, now you're living this life, and do you really feel that this is, there's a way forward for you? So that would be my recommendation. After you've been practicing for a while, next step is to make a bit stronger commitment and to be in the monastery and living within the rules and regulations and following the monastic life in one form or another, depending on what the monastery can provide for you. And then just go for it. Yeah, the Buddha says the holy life is it's the most excellent way of living your life as a human being. And that's certainly my conviction. I think that if you don't have family responsibilities and things that you really need to attend to, you have that kind of freedom, autonomy, and you have the faith in Buddha Dhamma, then wonderful choice. Best thing you could possibly do.
Let other people first. Yeah, you?
Ajahn Jayasaro, I'm wondering, could you share a little bit about how to translate Buddhist education to modern education system?
Yes, I mean, if you ever have the opportunity to come to Thailand, I'd be very happy to introduce you to the schools I'm working with, and you can see for yourself, because it's very briefly, coming back to what I mentioned just now, is I see the Eightfold Path as like the ultimate education system. And so the idea is to adapt that to an ordinary education system in a way that's appropriate for children, and not for children who want to become monastics, but for children who are going to live life in the world. Now, from the Eightfold Path, we usually bring that down to the three trainings of Sila, Samadhi and Panya. I found that when I was first developing this model, that these days more kind of urban, middle-class people find it a little bit worried if you use too many overtly Buddhist terms. They're just worried, well, yeah, maybe you just turn my son or daughter into a monk or a nun. That's not what I want, And there's a lot of misunderstanding about what a Buddhist model of education would mean. For me, it means that it's an education of every area, every dimension of life, rather than the purely intellectual, and it fills in a lot of the gaps which are left in most conventional educational models. So I went to the suttas and read through, and I was looking for some alternative way of presenting the same material. And I came across teaching what they call the 4 kinds of bhavana. So the word bhavana translates literally as cultivation, but it is the word which is also the word in Thai is for meditation. It's like bhavana. And in the teaching on the 4 bhavana, the Buddha just simply takes this threefold training of sila, of conduct, samadhi, of the mind, of the heart, and panya, and just presents it in a slightly different way. So sila is divided into 2. So it's the relationship to the material world, and the second is the relationship to the social world. So this is sila, your conduct vis-a-vis the world divided into two, material world and social world. And then sila as samadhi, which when you use that word, it encourages people to think it's a matter of sitting with your eyes closed. Then it's the training of the heart. And then wisdom is wisdom. So our model is like 4 pavana, cultivating the human, the children, the student's relationship to the material world, the student's relationship to the social world, and then the student's inner world of emotion and his thinking and wisdom faculty. With regard to that first of the 4 kinds of pavana, then there's a model like sort of concentric spheres. So the inner sphere is that element of the physical world which you take immediate responsibility for. It's your body. So that developing a wise relationship to the body. So that would include things like nutrition and exercise and sport, and getting enough rest and human biology and sex education, everything to do with the physical body. And then the second circle would be the material world, which you have everyday contact with, and including technology and what we call the 4 requisites of clothing and shelter, and the material world directly around you, and then like the material sciences can be included in this quadrant. So we're also sort of dividing up the academic disciplines and allotting them to these 4 different quadrants. And then the outer circle would be the environment and how to relate wisely to the environment. So there's the body, the material world around us, and then the environment. With regard to the social world, then we're talking about how to use precepts, regulations, conventions, agreements, precepts as skillful tools to create the kinds of environment which are most conducive to the realization of human goals. So like in a classroom, what kind of agreements do we need to, as regards our conduct and our speech, to create an atmosphere most conducive to learning? In a family, what's the kind of agreements we need to create a sense of safety and trust and so on? So this is the whole skillful use of precepts and agreements in social groups. Then the second area we stress is developing communication skills. And the third is developing the wish and the skills to contribute to the larger community and to the society at large. So more altruistic development. And then the academic disciplines that will come here would be like social studies and history and things like this. Then the inner, the heart, would be emphasizing what we call the 4 right efforts, teaching children ways to look after their minds in such a way to prevent the arising of unwholesome things like stress, anxiety, depression, so on. How do you look after your mind to protect yourself against them? Or if they do arise, how do you deal with them? And teaching meditation practices to cultivate wholesome mental states of mindfulness and patience and contentment, and how to develop skills of self-motivation and resilience and patience and all these kinds of things. And then the 4th area will start off with teaching creative and critical thinking skills, and then going on to more specifically Buddhist kinds of contemplations and reflections. So that would be the overall kind of structure of the model. And one of there are some kind of key features. One is the Buddha referred to the Arahant as the graduate, the one who has, he's the one who's no longer need to study. He's done all his work. So from that we can say, apart from the Arahant or the great, everyone, we're still things we need to study. So in the school we say we have three groups of students. There's the children, the teachers and the parents. And so this idea, we're a learning community and everyone's learning. The teachers are learning, and the parents are learning. And we have the idea of kalyana, a mitta, of good friendship, and trying to create this good friendship community. And so there's a very high level of commitment expected both from teachers and parents. And in the admission process, then the parents are interrogate, you know, they really have to show that they're really into this and they're really going to support their child. Sometimes the child is really ready for this kind of, but the parents obviously aren't, and then we won't take them, because if the parents aren't supported, it just won't work.
What age?
Hmm?
What age of the student?
Well, in Bangkok, there's a Tosi school, which is kindergarten up to grade 6, Bohok. And then we have the co-ed boarding school, which is just down the road from my hermitage, which is high school from morning to Mohawk, so M1 to M6.
We need a lot of this kind of school everywhere now. We're in a crisis. Because students now, I mean, as the mom myself, two sons in teenager, and doing the classes in the Wat Puthanusaran, I'm doing not just teaching Thai, but Buddhism, whatever, the 2% I have, but then I try to, I mean, my, what do you call that, my ethic kind of point of the teaching is, first, being a teacher, teaching is the most important thing to teach, is to teach them to be a good human being, and the subject is come later.
Yeah, my criticism is that, again, you know, in Thailand, so much problem because of this assumption that you know, there are the Western values are universal values and we have to adapt to them, and Western ways of doing things. So if you look at the belief system, religions, Christianity, Islam, you have to teach the life of their founder. As you know, if you were to teach Christianity, you teach the life of Jesus. If you teach Islam, you teach the life of Muhammad. No, you have no alternative. And Buddhists just assume, therefore, if you're going to teach Buddhism, it should be based on life of the Buddha. And I don't think that's necessary and correct. It doesn't work very well. Particularly if you have kids these days who are a little bit skeptical and alienated, you know, and then what's the first thing? You've got these kids who are not really very committed already, and you say, oh, the Bodhisattva is born and from his mother's womb, and he takes 7 steps and pronounces, I'm the greatest, you know. You know, what more efficient way of alienating your students, you know? So, you know, I'm developing again with like a Buddhist curriculum. My school's was it's like practical Buddhism. So it's a thematic approach. And this is the way the Buddha taught. So what is it that's important to kids these days? What do they worry about? What do they suffer? What are they interested in? And then you take that as your basis, and then you say, well, this is what Buddhism says about this. And then you can bring stories from the life of the Buddha to illustrate, but you're illustrating themes and things that really connect with the children, rather than saying we have to learn the Buddha's life from A to B to C. And this doesn't work. It really doesn't work. Sorry, were you going to say something?
Just a clarification, for the social element, there's the environment, there is the communication, the third one.
So in the first quadrant, or like the relationship with the material world, is like the body and then the material world directly around us, the four requisites and technology and all these things, and then the environment. And then the second area, the relationship to society, learning how to use precepts and agreements and conventions and rituals and all these things to create the kind of environments that are most supportive for us as human beings. Second one would be communication skills, and third, the motivation and the skills to help others and to go out to the wider world. Yeah.
One last very quick question. So, where is your school in Thailand?
So the kindergarten and primary school is in Bangkok, and the co-ed boarding school is in a place called Bak Chong, which is a couple of hours to the northeast in the countryside, which is where I live. And then there's a third school that follows my model in a slightly different way. It's an international school in Chiang Mai.
Beautiful place.
And so that the one in Chiang Mai is called Panyaden. So if you want to look at the website, it's Panyaden. I think it's org.th, I think. But if you have Panyaden, you'll find it. And then the other two, most of the material online is in Thai rather than English. But Panya Pratip is PANYAPRATEP.org, and the one in Bangkok is called Tosi School. Is Tosi, which is THAWSI school dot something. Yeah, no, it's been org. No.
I was wishing to send my kid over to your school at that time when they were little. Didn't have a chance.
But yeah, if you, as they say, if you or any of your colleagues friends want to come over and visit some of these schools, I'd be happy to arrange it for you.
Do you have summer course?
There is summer course at Tosi for kids, yeah. But that's usually in April. Because the long school holidays in Thailand are April, May.
So volunteer for the young adult, 27 and 30 can go volunteer. 27 and then 30 years old can go
จิต
volunteer.
อาสาได้ไหมคะ
Yeah.
ส่งลูกไป
Want to say anything?
One quick question. Regional schools, are they, you briefly mentioned, are they all conducted in English or Thai?
The Tosi school and Panyaden school, Panyapatip school are Thai language.
Okay.
And the one in Chiang Mai is international school, so it's English medium.
The second question would be, for lay people like us who have responsibilities, obviously, just by the conditions we created for ourselves. And I really like how you mentioned about being able to sit with discomfort. And notice that comes with training, actually, almost like you train your brain, rewiring your brain, and building the muscle memories for that. Do you have like a couple suggestions for, like lay people like us who certain practices that, like when you're sitting meditation, how do we reflect, how you observe
Well, I would say that even in a busy day, a busy life, there are lots of short gaps, 1, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. It might be walking from your car to a building, walking upstairs, walking downstairs, standing in a lift, and you can reclaim those short periods just to re-establish your mindfulness. And generally, like in a stressful day, it's rare that there are like major stressful incidents every now and again, but it's more this steady drip, drip, drip of stressful incidents, which by that like 5 or 6 in the evening, you're exhausted. But if you can cut those off and just like come back to yourself and start again throughout the day, then you'll find the quality of your mindfulness is much stronger. And as I say, like standing in the lift and just watching your breath or doing your mantra, whatever your practice might be, or walking meditation is such a good practice to develop because it's one that's just instantly able to integrate into daily life when you're walking, just as I say, walking from your car to a building to your car, walking across a park, and learning to just re-establish your mindfulness again and again. Good thing is if your telephone rings, don't pick it up immediately. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, then pick up your telephone. No, in terms of time, it's just a few seconds, but it really enables you to be that much more present when you speak, and more mindful in speech, and things like this. Meditation, a daily meditation practice really helps a lot, and especially if you can meditate first thing in the morning. Meditating before you go to sleep is good. I mean, it means you'll probably get a good night's sleep, and it's a release of stress. Good thing to do. But like the real work of meditation, it's difficult to do that at night time. But first thing in the morning, when you get up, you're fresh, you've slept, just wash your face, or just sort of get ready and chant or sit for half an hour. And then if you can either have a diary or just be very observant of any changes, just small, because it will be incremental changes. It won't be like wow kind of things, but you'll notice just a little bit more present, a little bit more patient, a little bit kinder, a little bit easier to let go in daily life. And when you can see that connection between a daily meditation practice and your daily life and this quality of mindfulness and so on, that motivates you to keep going. And it's continuity which is the key, really. There's some people can get really enthusiastic and go off on a retreat and then they just allow it all to dissipate, and that's not as beneficial as just a steady practice every day. Even if it's just for a few minutes, just maintain that continuity.